Please give a very warm welcome to Jeremy Jensen.
There's a lot of limiting beliefs out there about what life can really look like.
When you make a decision in the right direction that's congruent with your values, the universe will abide and it'll put a little bit of wind at your back.
You know, when I was in my 20s, I spent a lot of time traveling and vagabonding and all over the world and being a dirtbag, ultimately. And it's a good life. I had a lot of fun, but ultimately, at the end of the day, I realized that I felt kind of unfulfilled. And I felt like I was leaving something on the table. There was some potential untapped. So for God knows what reason, I decided to go back to school, take a loan from Uncle Sam and go to an expensive graduate school. I got married. I got a corporate America job paying me really well. And the rationale was this. It was like, well, yeah, I'll make a bunch of money and then I'll go back and do what I love later on. I wouldn't necessarily recommend that. So what happened was I got into a corporate job. The cubicle life and the shitty bosses and the boring work just didn't do it for me. But I didn't know how to create the life I really wanted. So I did what any good conflicted person would do, as I pretty much went into a state of inaction and depression. And ultimately, as I started to realize that I need to figure out what was getting in my way, what was holding me back. And it's really funny because Julie and almost every speaker's alluded to it in one way or another. It's this fear factor. For me, that was really a big deal. I didn't even realize it. I never acknowledged it to the point where I remember I was up at Snowbird and I was skiing and I don't know what happened. It was a great day. I just had a stroke of inspiration. I realized I wasn't living the life I wanted. And it felt like such a shame to me. So I committed to turn things around and I came up with this idea for this podcast. Basically what I tried to do is start learning from the people that I admired, from the people who are out there building businesses around cool lifestyles. And so I started interviewing people. And what I realized was there's a couple different takeaways when I started having these conversations with people. And the first realization that I came to was that we're so busy living our lives that we totally often forget to design our lives. And that just became so clear to me, and I was so guilty of that. And the more conversations I had, the more I realized that these people weren't superhuman. They weren't, we didn't have some God-given gift like the rest of us didn't have. It was just they were doing things a little differently. They were thinking differently. So I decided to commit myself to being a student of this sort of mindset piece. So it turns out there's actually a formula to being successful. It's actually pretty simple. But don't worry, I'll break it down for you guys. This makes total sense to me. No, kidding. So when you have a growth mindset, and you tack that onto killing some limiting beliefs, and then you take massive action, I truly think that you can do whatever you want. And I'm actually starting to realize that. I'm starting to live it. So what is a growth mindset? So the idea behind a growth mindset is kind of like half glass empty, half full type thing. right? When you have a growth mindset, you truly think that you can develop any skill that you need to get shit done, to get what you want out of life. A fixed mindset, contrastly, is that you believe you either can do it or you can't. It's finite, black and white. So we need to adopt a growth mindset if we don't already have one. We need to crush our limiting beliefs. Julie mentioned it, right? This idea of some variation of I'm not enough. I remember thinking, well, what if I fail? What if I put myself out there and I look like an idiot? Where do I even start? These things that hold us back are so detrimental, and we end up doing nothing. We got to get rid of this. And then we got to take massive action. This is the idea of, I truly believe you got to start before you're ready. You're never going to feel ready. I don't know, maybe you guys are better than me that way, but I've never felt like I was ready. I would constantly read things. Wait, if I figure out this other thing, I'll be so much better off. And one day I just said, fuck it, I just got to start. I got to do this. And I'm so glad I did, because I made mistakes, of course, but then people started listening to my show and reaching out to me, and I started building relationships with people that I had followed on Instagram, but I'm like, dude, that guy is pretty sick. And when you do all those things, you will enjoy your life. And the reason why I put up here bacon, because I love bacon. I love it. And when I think of what I want, it's all these little emojis and a lot of bacon. And Michael, Scott, and Dwight have it right. So there's the formula, right? But you know how some people sometimes give a speech and then they leave you all inspired and then they're like, peace out. What are you supposed to do with that, right? No, I don't want to do that. I want to give you a couple of things that you can actually take action on right now, sitting in the chair. Just even realizing that these things need to happen. So the first thing is you need to take full responsibility. And Ross Jennings did exactly that. He was working for Louis Vuitton, God knows why, but he was working for Louis Vuitton and he wanted to get into branding. And it was soul-sucking him. And he tells this story. He was biking in London and he went past this building and saw an advertisement for the Adventure Travel Show in London. And he's like, screw it, I'm gonna go. So he went and he met this guy. Dave, I can't remember his last name, but I wish I did because he's pretty cool. This guy skateboarded across Australia. Broke a world record. No one's done that, surprisingly. But he made a name for himself. He made a brand for himself, and he's now doing all these wacky things. Like now he's paddleboarding all the way around Norway. It is these crazy things to break world records. And Ross, that resonated with him. And he went home, and he describes in my podcast the day that he went home, riding 1,000,000 miles an hour, getting home, opening up the door, opening up his laptop, trying to type. Has anyone ever, he's a bagpiper in case you can't tell. Has anyone ever bagpiped in Antarctica? He's going to be the first person to do it. Sure enough, what pops up is a picture of a guy from 1919. One guy 100 years ago had bagpiped in Antarctica, ruined his dreams, and he's like, shit. But he thought quick on his feet and he decided, I'm going to do something else. So what he decided, even cooler, this guy is going to every single country on the planet and bagpiping. And what's cool about that, it might be a little weird, but when I talked to him, there was this amazing story behind the human connection with music. I mean, in case you haven't heard the bagpipes, they're pretty, they're there. They're loud. When you play them, people hear it for blocks, if not miles. I love them. But he's made all these human connections. And quick story, he was in, I think this is Qatar or somewhere. And basically, in Qatar they have, and don't quote me on the country, I'm sorry, but basically they have, clear back in the Middle Ages, they were actually the ones that came up with the bagpipes. It wasn't the Scottish. And so when he went to Qatar and started playing his bagpipes, all these people started just coming out of the woodwork, admiring, oh my God, you play the bagpipes and it's this national treasure. And he would have never known. Just cool stuff like that. So he's living his dream. He's making good money. He's got a content creation company called Three Wheels Co. And he goes all over the world and he creates amazing imagery. Works with tourism boards, on and on. The next thing we have to do is start with our why. Yana Robinson. Anyone know her? What a badass. Okay, this woman, so do you see her shirt? This is for the women who don't give a fuck. She was a commercial real estate agent in Edmonton, Canada. Grew up there, it's an oil mining town. Some people might know it here. And hated it. She just loved to be by the ocean. She loved surfing. She loved surfing and she loved riding. But she was stuck in her commercial real estate job and she didn't know what to do. So basically, she got an internship with a woman who was a National Geographic photographer, basically showed her the ropes. And what happened was she learned from her how to think. She learned how to identify what it was that captivated her. She learned how to identify her why. Anyone heard of Simon Sinek, The Golden Circle? Start with why. Great book. Please check it out. If you ever want to figure out something about yourself, start with why. That's exactly what she did. And she wrote a piece speaking her heart, being authentic and living truths. That's her why. Called This Is for the Women Who Don't Give a Fuck. Blew up, went viral. She's now got hundreds of thousands of fans on every channel you can think of, a business. She surfs every day and writes poetry for a living, like legit. Anyone know this guy? Julian Carr? Okay. Embrace uncertainty. So if anyone can embrace uncertainty, it's this guy. So this guy, not only does he hold 2 world records for inverted height cliff sends, he holds the record for 210 feet front flip. That's that clip in the video, I don't know, the really big cliff. Talk about uncertainty. This guy didn't know if he would live on half of these projects that he decided to do. But when I talked to him, he talked about this Zen state, this mindset that he got himself into, where he was able to completely tap into this calmness, but right before he was about to do a front flip off a 200-foot plus cliff. And now he just can't go back. 150 feet is routine. Plus he owns a company called Discreet Clothing. They make hats, that's Spider, but they have jackets, all that stuff. He's a successful entrepreneur. So in case you haven't noticed the theme by now, and my show's called The Adventurepreneur Playbook, it's about people building businesses around their passions. So embrace uncertainty. You know who this is? Jim Harris, aka Perpetual Weekend. Man, this guy, his story, I get choked up right now. Develop bomb-proof grit and resilience. I'll try and make his story short. Basically, he was on an expedition in Chile, in the Patagonia region. And him and Forrest McCarthy were going to go ski on this glacier. No one, like 2 other people had ever done it, super remote in the Patagonia region. In fact, it was so remote that they had, to save a little time, they decided they had to snow kite into the peak, into the base, so they could save some time, like days. And Jim, a pretty adventurous guy. He's a photographer by trade. He's got Powder magazine covers and National Geographic stuff. He'd never really snow kited too much before. And they got on the snow, doing some practice snow kiting, and sure enough, some wind comes up, lifts him 25 feet into the air, then 40 feet. And he tells me, I remember thinking, shit, I'm gonna break my ankle and it's gonna ruin the trip. He woke up paralyzed from his neck down. This guy just did 4,000 vertical feet outside of Carbondale, Colorado, 2 days ago on his mountain bike. Talk about grit and resilience. You bet your ass. This guy worked his ass off for 3 years learning to walk. I biked with him on Slick Rock when we talked for the interview. He's just killing it on the bike. He walks a little drunk, but hey, he's walking. That's grit. When you demonstrate grit in your life, you don't let things, the small things or the big things, get in your way. You keep going. That's when the good stuff happens. And the last thing, John Collinson. I love this story because, first of all, cultivate meaningful relationships. Julie talked about that too, right? It's all about relationships, right? It's all about who we know and how we spend our time with the people we care about. So John tells this really funny story about when he was just a young kid coming up. I mean, he's still young, but especially young. And I think he was just before he landed his first Sherpa Cinema gig in Into the Mind. There was some of that footage, by the way. And he talks about talking to Ian McIntosh, and Ian pulls him aside and he's like, dude, hey man, you gotta stay up and party. And John was just like, what do you mean, man? He's like, that's where all the big deals are made. You know, people get loosened up with a little liquor, and that's where your career will really take off. And I just had to laugh, but it's so true, right? It's all about just coming in and talking to people and building some relationships. And great things started to happen for John after that. So, just closing really quick. I got a challenge for you all. And that is, most people, when they hear something or they're exposed to a few new ideas, frankly, they just don't take any action. And I would just challenge you in any way at all, if anything here resonated with you, just give it some thought. That's the beginning. If you're not taking full responsibility for having your life where you want it to be, think about that a little bit. See if there's something you can do, a small win, to change that. Don't be like most people. Thanks, guys. I appreciate it.